Ever notice how often you hear people say bipolar? Like, I don't know, just a casual thing. Like, ugh, the weather's so bipolar today.
Right.
But we're here to really kind of unpack the reality of bipolar disorder. It's a topic that deserves, I think, a pretty deep dive.
Absolutely. I think it's a term that gets misused pretty often,
Yeah,
and it really minimizes what people go through.
totally. So, no weather jokes today. We're diving into this insightful podcast script. And let me tell you, some of the stuff in here is seriously eye-opening. We're going way beyond just, those textbook definitions.
Right.
We're talking about the spectrum of bipolar disorder and how people not just manage, but actually thrive.
Yeah, and I think one of the most important things to get straight from the beginning is that this isn't just about like you and me having mood swings, right? It's a whole other level.
Totally.
It's the intensity. It's how long these episodes last.
Right. It's not just having a bad day.
Exactly.
This script really emphasizes that these episodes can drag on for weeks, even months. It makes you think, like, how do you navigate life, a job, relationships, when you're on that kind of roller coaster?
And what's interesting is this script lays out that there are actually three main types, which I think a lot of people just assume it's like one thing. Bipolar disorder is bipolar disorder.
Right, right. Okay, so break it down. We've got bipolar 1, bipolar 2,
Yes.
and then cyclothymic disorder.
Yeah, and they each kind of have their own characteristics. So bipolar I, you're talking about those like classic, really extreme manic episodes
Okay.
that can be really, really debilitating. We're talking like hallucinations in some cases, delusions, completely detached from reality.
Wow. And so how does that differ then to bipolar 2?
So with bipolar 2, you still have those highs and lows, but the manic phases aren't quite as intense. They call them hypomanic episodes.
Yeah.
So they can still be disruptive to your life, but you're not usually totally disconnected from reality.
Okay, okay. So
Yeah.
someone with bipolar 2 might be like super energized, maybe more talkative,
Right.
but they're not necessarily going to have those same like intense, almost psychotic kind of features as someone with bipolar 1.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then you've got cyclothymic disorder, which is the mood swings are less severe,
Okay.
but they last longer.
Oh, wow.
So it's kind of like you're on a constant roller coaster
Yeah.
emotionally, and that obviously takes its toll over time.
Right, right.
So it's really important to remember that bipolar disorder, like the severity and the symptoms, they can be so different from person to person.
So let's talk symptoms, because that's where I think a lot of the misconceptions are, maybe.
Yeah.
One that I thought was really interesting from the script was this idea of racing thoughts during mania.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. And it's not just that your thoughts are racing. It's like you can't even control it.
It's constant.
Yeah, you could be trying to like do the dishes and
Yeah.
it just doesn't stop.
Exhausting.
Yeah, very distracting.
And then, I mean, on top of that, there's the risky behavior
Yes.
that can happen during a manic episode, like impulsive spending sprees. That's something, I don't know, I'd never really put those two things together.
It's all about judgment. Like your judgment is impaired, you're more impulsive, and so suddenly, that risky investment doesn't seem so risky anymore.
Right. Okay.
And buying that like $1,000 pair of shoes, totally justifiable in the moment.
Right. I need those shoes.
Exactly. It's tough.
And then, of course, the flip side is you have these really intense periods of depression.
Yes.
Which, let's be real, can be just as debilitating.
Oh, absolutely. And this script does not sugarcoat it.
Right.
You're talking about just overwhelming fatigue,
Oh, yeah.
losing interest in things that you used to love. It's like somebody just like sucks all the joy and motivation out of your life.
It's like the world's in black and white. You're just going through the motions.
Yeah.
What I thought was interesting, and I'd never really thought about this before, is this connection between all of this and what's actually happening in the brain, like chemically.
Yeah.
It's not just a matter of snapping out of it, right?
No, it's biological. Your brain is literally functioning differently. Like during a depressive episode, the areas of your brain that are associated with pleasure, reward,
Right.
they're basically offline.
Wow.
So something that would normally bring you joy, like let's say spending time with friends, it doesn't register the same way.
It's like it's not even an option for you.
Yeah. Exactly.
So then what is it that actually triggers these changes in the brain? Like what sets off this whole roller coaster ride in the first place?
That is the question, right? And the script, it points out like there's no easy answer. It's usually a whole bunch of things all coming together.
Right.
Genetics are definitely part of it.
Sure.
So if you've got a family history of bipolar disorder, you're more likely to develop it too.
Right.
But it's not like you inherit one gene and boom, you got bipolar disorder.
Right. It's more of a predisposition, right?
Yeah.
Like you might be more vulnerable because of your genes,
Exactly.
but then it takes something from your environment to kind of like set it off.
It's a good way to put it. The script actually uses a really helpful analogy. Imagine two cars. They're identical, but one has like a slightly weaker braking system.
Okay.
So that car might be totally fine under normal circumstances. But if you take it up like a winding mountain road, suddenly that weakness is a big deal.
Right, right. Because it's put under more pressure.
Exactly. And in the same way, someone who's genetically predisposed to bipolar disorder, they might be more sensitive to stress.
So like a big life change, a
Yeah.
traumatic event, even just that, like constant low-level stress, that could be the winding mountain road for them.
That's a really good way to think about it.
And that's what we're layering on top of that, those differences in how the brain is actually structured and how it functions.
Absolutely. Researchers are still like teasing apart all those connections.
Right.
But it's clear that with bipolar disorder, there are certain parts of the brain that are involved in regulating mood, controlling impulses. They're just not working the same way.
It's all connected.
And that actually brings us to treatment because if you understand these root causes, it helps you figure out how to actually help people.
Totally. And something I thought was really positive, this script emphasizes a multifaceted approach to treatment. It's not just about medication, is it?
Not at all. You have to look at the whole person.
Right.
So we're talking about medication, therapy, lifestyle changes, and having a good support system.
Okay, let's break those down a bit.
Sure.
So medication is probably the first line of defense, I'm guessing, to get those mood swings under control.
Exactly. Medications like mood stabilizers and antipsychotics can be really helpful in managing those highs and lows, trying to prevent those really extreme shifts.
Okay.
But medication alone isn't enough.
You need more.
You need therapy too.
Right, because you have to address those thought patterns.
Exactly.
And maybe some of the behaviors that are kind of feeding into this cycle, right?
Yeah, and there are specific therapies that can help with that, like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT.
I've heard of that.
That's really good for helping people identify those negative thought patterns, the ones that can lead to anxiety, depression, and learn how to change them.
Oh, interesting.
And then there's another type of therapy. It's called interpersonal and social rhythm therapy.
Okay, that's a mouthful.
It is, but it basically focuses on regulating your sleep-wake cycle,
Okay,
getting into a good routine, which can really help manage those mood swings.
makes sense. So it's like giving people the tools to kind of recognize their triggers,
Yes.
manage their stress,
Yes.
and just like learn to cope with all these really intense emotions, but in a healthy way.
Exactly.
And that's where I guess those lifestyle changes come in too, right?
100%.
Sleep, exercise, all those things we're always told are good for us.
They make a huge difference. Like exercise, there's actually evidence that regular exercise can have mood-boosting effects that are comparable to some antidepressants.
Really? Wow.
It's pretty powerful. And then sleep, we all know how important sleep is.
Right.
But for someone with bipolar disorder, having that consistent sleep schedule is huge.
I can only imagine. Even I know how thrown off I feel after one bad night's sleep.
Oh, absolutely.
I can't imagine dealing with that on top of everything else.
Yeah.
So it's like all these pieces kind of work together to create more stability.
Hmm.
But there's one more element we haven't talked about yet. Support systems.
Oh, so important. Having people in your corner who get it, who can offer support without judgment, that's invaluable.
And that takes awareness,
Oh.
right? Because there are just so many myths and misconceptions around bipolar disorder.
Yeah.
This script, I was really surprised by how many it actually debunks.
It's true, there are a lot.
Like, the one that always gets me is this idea that people with bipolar disorder are dangerous, that they're unpredictable. Like, where does that even come from?
I think it's just fear of the unknown and a lack of understanding.
Right.
The truth is, individuals with bipolar disorder, they're far more likely to be the victims of violence, not the perpetrators.
It's so important to remember that mental illness does not equal violence.
Absolutely.
It's not the case.
It's a harmful stereotype.
Totally.
Yeah.
And another one the script tackles is that people with bipolar disorder can't hold down jobs. They can't have successful careers.
Which is just ridiculous.
Just not true.
Yeah. With the right treatment and support, people with bipolar disorder, they can achieve amazing things.
Right.
They contribute to society, they have fulfilling lives. It's about breaking down those barriers and creating a world where they feel supported, where they feel like they belong.
Totally. And that's where advocating for yourself comes in, or advocating for a loved one who might be struggling.
Huge. Self-advocacy is so important. It's about learning about the condition yourself, understanding your rights. Don't be afraid to ask for what you need.
Exactly. Find your voice. Use it to challenge those misconceptions.
Yes.
We have to educate people, create a world that's more informed, more compassionate.
100%.
It makes you think about the bigger picture here.
Yeah, for sure. This goes way beyond just individual experiences. We need to look at how we, as a society, how we treat mental health.
Totally.
Right.
Are we making space for people to be open about this stuff? Are we really trying to understand?
Yeah, are we supporting people or are we just making them feel worse?
Right, exactly.
I think stigma thrives in silence.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
When we don't talk about these things, when we just rely on those stereotypes, we're basically shutting down any chance of really helping.
It's like we're part of the problem without even realizing it.
In a way.
Yeah, it makes you
Right.
wonder, how many people are out there suffering, but they're too afraid to say anything?
So many.
They don't want to be judged.
Exactly. And that's why we have to talk about it.
Yeah.
We have to make these conversations normal.
Normalize it. I like that.
We have to challenge those ideas that are just hurting people.
Yeah. We all have a role to play in this.
We do.
If there's one thing I'm taking away from this whole deep dive, it's the importance of empathy.
It's huge.
It's so easy to judge, to make assumptions about things we don't get.
Absolutely. But when we actually listen, when we try to understand what someone else is going through, even if it's totally different from our own lives,
Right.
that's how we start to make things better.
And realize that, a diagnosis, whatever it is, that doesn't define who someone is.
So true. We're all way more complicated than that.
This has been pretty amazing, actually. We've covered so much.
We have. It's been a journey.
All those myths, the different ways bipolar disorder can show up, the challenges, the good stuff too, treatment, support, all of it.
And I think the most important takeaway is there's always hope. Bipolar disorder is tough, but it doesn't have to control your whole life.
With the right treatment, the right support, people can still have amazing lives.
Absolutely. They're capable of anything.
So to anyone out there listening, if you're dealing with this, or if you love someone who is, please know you're not alone.
There's help out there.
Yes, reach out.
Talk to someone.
There are people who get it.
You don't have to go through this alone.
And you never know, sharing your story might help someone else find their voice.
That's so true. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for this. This was eye-opening.
My pleasure. Always happy to talk about this.
And to everyone listening, be kind to yourself, be kind to each other, and keep those conversations going. We'll see you next time.